To most people, King George III is a punchline, the mad king who lost the American colonies. But new medical research suggests his madness was not a joke, not porphyria, and not just royal eccentricity. It was a severe, recurrent mental illness that today would likely be labeled bipolar disorder, made far worse by arsenic-based medicines and brutal treatments that pushed his brain past the breaking point. During his episodes, George talked so fast and so long that witnesses said foam ran from his mouth. He wrote page after page of rambling, incoherent letters, and he terrified his own family with sudden outbursts of rage and confusion. This is the story of Britain's longest-reigning Hanoverian king at war with his own mind, and of how misunderstanding his illness changed the course of British and American history. George William Frederick was born on June 4, 1738, at Norfolk House in St. James's Square in London, the eldest son of Frederick, Prince of Wales, and Princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha. His birth was unexpected. He arrived 2 months premature and was so weak that nurses thought he would not survive. He was baptized immediately by the Bishop of Oxford, his parents uncertain he would draw another breath. But the fragile infant grew into a healthy, reserved, and intelligent child who showed no signs of the instability that would later haunt him. George's childhood was marked by rigorous education and rigid discipline. Unlike his German-born predecessors on the British throne, George was the first British monarch to be systematically educated in science, mathematics, astronomy, and the full range of subjects befitting an enlightened ruler. By age 8, he could read and write in English and German, comment on political events, and demonstrate a grasp of complex subjects. His tutors taught him Latin, Greek, history, chemistry, physics, constitutional law, music, fencing, and agriculture. Everything a future king would need to govern effectively. But beneath the accomplishments lay a boy who was emotionally guarded, even cold. One tutor described him as sullen, indolent, and unhappy, a child who kept his feelings locked away behind a wall of duty and obligation. The death of his father, Frederick, in March 1751, when George was only 12 years old, transformed his life. His father, who had focused all his hopes and expectations on the young prince, suddenly vanished. George became heir to the throne, and the pressure on him intensified dramatically. His mother, Princess Augusta, took personal charge of his education and instilled in him an almost religious sense of obligation to serve the nation. She surrounded him with tutors who emphasized duty above all else, duty to God, duty to the crown, duty to the realm. One tutor, the Scottish nobleman John Stuart, 3rd Earl of Bute, became a father figure to George, helping him overcome his natural shyness and encouraging him to see himself as destined for something greater than ordinary life. The message was clear: George III was born to rule. Failure was not an option. By the time George became king, on October 23, 1760, at the age of 22, he had internalized these lessons completely. Unlike his German-born grandfather, George II, this new king declared to Parliament and public, "Born and raised in this country, I glory in the name of Britain." From the beginning, he presented himself not as a foreign prince, but as a patriotic Englishman devoted entirely to the welfare of his nation. Those who met him in his early reign were impressed by his diligence, his sense of duty, and his almost uncomfortable piety. He was not arrogant or volatile like many monarchs of his age. He was thoughtful, even-tempered, and made genuine efforts to understand the concerns of his subjects. In 1768, a woman named Margaret Nicholson attacked him with a knife, trying to plunge it into his chest. When guards roughly dragged her away, George cried out, "The poor creature is mad. Do not hurt her. She has not hurt me." He then ensured she was taken to a hospital rather than executed, a remarkable act of mercy from a monarch in an age of harsh punishment. But beneath this calm, dutiful exterior lay troubling patterns that hinted at the darkness to come. George was emotionally reserved to the point of coldness, especially toward his own family. While he loved his children deeply in his early years, His affection manifested as rigid control and harsh discipline. He forced them into exhausting schedules of lessons, demanded strict religious observance, and punished any deviation from his exacting moral standards with cold disapproval. His daughters especially suffered under his controlling hand. He was reluctant to arrange marriages for them, keeping them confined and unmarried well into their 30s and 40s. One of his daughters, Princess Augusta, wrote in despair that she was suffering martyrdom from anxiety of mind and deprivation of happiness. George was also stubborn to a fault, almost rigidly so. Once he made a decision, it was nearly impossible to change his mind. During the American Revolution, for example, he became convinced that compromise was weakness and that the colonies had to be crushed to preserve British power. The too great leniency of this country increased their pride and encouraged them to rebel, he wrote to his Prime Minister, Lord North. In 1783, after years of costly war, he had to accept the independence of America, a defeat he never forgave himself or those who advised him to accept it. He brooded over that loss for years, seeing it as a personal failure and a stain on his reign. Yet despite this setback, he remained intellectually capable and politically effective through the 1770s and 1780s under the ministry of Lord North and later the brilliant Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger. To the world, George III appeared to be exactly what he had been trained to be, a dutiful, intelligent, pious king doing his best to govern a great nation.
Nobody saw the warning signs. Nobody noticed that the obsessive need for order, the emotional detachment, the inability to accept failure, and the rigid moral judgment might be signs of something deeper, something that, under extreme pressure, might crack the ordered surface and let chaos pour through.